Well, welcome back. We are on week 4. We're almost finished with the second topic of the Atlantic world revolts. We're in the 4th of 5 video series in this particular topic. We talked about the French Revolution last week. It's just beginning 1789. It sort of, the people rise up. They take the ideas of the democratic revolution, the idea of the philosophes of individuality, of rights, natural rights, of liberties, and they've taken over. The question is, does it last? And as I said last time, the French sort of history in its revolution is not a pretty one. It's not one that was quick and easy. We're going to take this all the way through past the turn of the century into the 1800s. But for this particular lecture, we're going to look at the next section. We had the French Revolution, and then by 1792, we begin the French Republic. So without further ado, let's jump into that and see what in the world happened. We're going to look at some of the first attempts of this republic. The birth of terror is what I call it, the birth of terror. This is another phase of the French Revolution. A nation at arms, and then we're going to look at a nation revolts yet again. So this will be the third revolt. So the first revolt is the French Revolution, 89. Second one, the Republic, as we're going to speak, is 1792. We're going to get another one in 1794. So with this, let's see what's going on. If you remember, the French Revolution initially was more about the others, the top others, not all the way down to the bottom, to the peasants, not to the common man, the common woman. It's always that upper echelon of the others. It wasn't the clergy, which was the first estate. It wasn't the nobility and aristocracy of the second estate. This was the third estate, but it was only the top crust of them. Still about 80% of the population was still unrepresented and still did not have a voice. And they're starting to begin this kind of grumbling and, hey, what about us? It's starting to really bother them because, in part, the group that's in charge, this new group, this National Constituents Assembly, along with the monarch, because remember this was a constitutional monarchy, so it still had the king, King Louis still there. So there's still a feeling of they don't represent us. They're not giving us. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in. Problems is they're not, as we're going to see, they're facing some pretty big situations and problems that are not getting resolved. And so let's take a look at those. So the first attempt is in 1792 when the others, these other people, rise up against the monarchy and against the National Constituents Assembly, that upper echelon other group. They rise up. You got about 700 plus business people, tradesmen, other professionals. These are common people, but they're still upper middle class. They're still a little bit higher than, and are not including the bottom. And they create this national convention. And as I said, it completely removes the monarchy. There's no more king. There is no more National Constituents Assembly. They're going to start all new. This is their first attempt of inclusion, so to speak, to get the others to really truly be represented. But their thinking at this point is how do we maintain this? How do we keep control? These are not the folks with the armies. These are not the folks with the connections and the international connections. They're not the upper class. They're not the upper echelon. So they take on this sort of mentality, this philosophy that anybody who is against them is an enemy of the nation. Men, women, children, priests, and bishops, they had already been imprisoned under the previous regime, so to speak. But they were still present. They were still throughout all of Paris in these various different prisons, the aristocracy and stuff. But they're in prison. And these people, this new republic, these new mobs rise up and they say, the best way to really put our point across is to be as harsh and as terror-inflicting as possible. Because if people are afraid of us, then we'll have less resistance, I think was their thinking. Because again, they don't have a massive army to go over and put things down and enforce their new republic. Initially, it's about 1,400 people that are in these prisons. They are brought out, and we're going to find out in the next slide what happens with these folks. Committees in this national convention sort of rise up. They're not all in agreement. They're not all in the same sort of agenda kind of mindset, but for the most part, these committees are kind of rising up. They're kind of like little cliques, little groups, sort of like Democrats and Republicans and independents, and they're kind of all over the place. So these committees rise up, but one in particular is the Committee of Public Safety, and they're going to take over soon. But as they rise up with this idea of terror, idea of inflicting as much horror into the public to sort of keep them under control, mobs rush these prisons. They rush into these prisons where these old imprisoned nobility, upper echelons, priests, clerics, first estate, second estate kind of people, they're in there. And rather than just leave them there or do something right for them, what these mobs do is they go in, they grab them, they hold these mock sort of trials. Are you part of the aristocracy? Are you nobility? Do you believe in our republic? Are you for us? Those types of questions. And that's the grounds on which judgment is made. And the people, just ordinary people, are making these judgments. And as you would guess, they're being brought out into the streets and being hacked to pieces, by these new mobs, this new republic mob. You can look at this one. This one is one of the prisons. It has, like I said, about 1,400 people in it, or about 200 to 400 people in it. They are going to be pulled out on these mock trials, and they're going to be hacked into little bits, whether it's really good. I mean, you can look at the picture here. It's kind of a blown up picture. My English. So if you look closely, they're just pulling them out of the prison and just hacking them in the streets. This is the judgment. This is that imposing of terror upon the greater public. And this is between 1793, 1794, and it comes out of this monism philosophy. There's different kind of branches of the democratic revolution. How do we see democracy? How do we see liberties in government? And monism is one of them. Monism is the one that France is sort of embracing at this time. They want to speak mono, one voice dominates the country. It forces complete compliance and conformity to that voice, that national, agreed upon, unified voice. And there's a singular government power that is kind of dictating what this voice is saying, what do they believe. And there is no room for opinion or debate. It must be controlled. So there's this demand for zero tolerance on anyone, any thought, anywhere that is opposed to the Republic and the Republic's voice, that national voice, even though it didn't really still consist of the entire nation. The nation did not speak with one voice, but the republic, those that were doing this mob rule sort of thing, they seemed to speak with a greater unified voice. And anybody that did not comply was imprisoned, killed, or removed. So, or they had to escape, they had to run away. Now, compare that for a moment with the American experiment. That was the French experiment. They're trying to figure out how to bring democracy thinking into their lives in society and government. The United States had already established itself using these same sort of philosoph kind of ideals and ideas on liberties and things like that. But they clung to a pluralism. It's not mono, one, it's plural, many. And they embraced to a greater extent the idea of diversity, plurality, many, a multiple gathering of voices and ideas. And in that conversation of many voices and many talents and many viewpoints would rise to the occasion of a majority voice. And that majority voice would be able to do things like separate powers of government. It wasn't a single power that was voicing its laws and its rule. It was separate. It had the Congress, and it was many people in Congress, and it was the executive branch, and it was the judicial system that's kind of watching the laws and how they're applied and how they're enforced, making sure everyone is in compliance with what the Constitution had said. This was an embracing of diversity to create unity. Everyone has a voice. It doesn't all have to be the same, but we all agree that the majority voice is the one that we will follow. And that's sort of what we see towards about 1782 when we come up with this national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. So we always have celebrated the pluralistic nature of this country and its government and where the people stand. But it stands in really, really stark contrast to the French democracy and how they're sort of experimenting this thing out and making it happen. So I just wanted to bring that up to show that there is a contrast, even though these are the same thoughts, same ideas being brought to the democratic revolutions, that how people interpret and implement them is often very different. And so here's the perfect example. France is doing it with a mono voice, a monism, whereas America is doing it with a pluralism. And both have pros and cons. So, talked about again about that Committee of Public Safety. This is one of those big, very powerful, very influential sort of committees, groups that rise up in this national convention, and it starts in it starts in Paris. It was probably the most radically horrific group of them all. They killed any enemy, foreign or domestic, who was against this national voice, and they killed thousands upon thousands. And its primary leader was a gentleman by Maximilien de Robespierre. He was a lawyer, very meek, very mild. He was referred to in history as being very cat-like, almost timid. He sort of rises to the occasion, this moment in time, and becomes like the biggest voice that's behind this. Hey, we must kill. We must eliminate our enemies. He is the voice of this reign of terror and rises to bring his nation into arms. The nation is going to rise up with violence to make its republic secure. That's what they think. They think that's the only way to do it. Democracy, conversations, don't work. It's sort of like trying to raise a child, and the child is the supermarket. You can have conversation with this child if you like, and maybe it will work. Well, Robespierre is not that kind of parent. He's not that kind of leader. Robespierre, for all his timidity, personally, is pretty wretched. He rises up and says, "Kill them, just flat out kill them. If you kill any opposition, they're gone, and you don't have to worry about it." So he calls the nation to arms. By 1793, the nation is going crazy. Land is being redistributed. Nobility is fleeing France. They're running away if they can get away from the mobs that are imprisoning them, if they can get rescued out of prisons. And everyone is picking a side. It's either black or white. There is no gray. There's no in between. Because again, you can't have any tolerance, no wiggle room, no opportunity for disagreement. It has to be one voice. And overall, during this two and a half year period of this reign of terror, you're talking 20 to 40,000 people are executed, either by guillotine, by mob hacking them into pieces, by shooting, whatever. It's really, really nasty, and it's everywhere. It's all over France, not just in Paris. I mean, if you take a look at this one, all those little orange, little like tentacles that are going out, those are mob excursions. They're the going out and putting that terror into the French populace. But you can see in that kind of dark blue, that kind of bluish purple, those are areas of France that really are not 100% behind this. They are looking for something other. It's not what's happening in the cities around the countrysides, et cetera, et cetera. This is not what these folks in the purple in these regions are really looking. They don't think this is the answer. So what ends up happening is this counter-revolution sort of rises up. We don't like this much terror. This is not where we want to be going. This is not the solution to securing our liberties. People are being, and their liberties are being exterminated. And they're being done without due process of law, without fairness. And so these ones in the blue, they rise up and they're going to say, no, we're going to fight our own people. So there's civil unrest and bickering and fighting. Not only that, but the neighboring nations, they're still monarchy. They're still under monarchy rule. And they are watching what these French people are doing, this mob, and they're saying, no. We don't want this kind of thinking spreading. We don't want it to come to our area. We need to come to the aid of the real authority, the real kings, the nobility, those who are in the church of high standing. And so the mob, this nation at arms in this republic, is not only fighting internally, fighting civil wars, but they're fighting against armies and nations that are coming in and trying to suppress them and saying, no, this is not what we want. So all of this is going on during this time. Finally, the nation, those edge groups, the ones that the purplish blue, those groups, and even some within the sort of chaotic regions, these people want to end terror. They don't like it. Robespierre is not the man of the day anymore. He is not the leader for us. He is too harsh. He's too radical. We want to kind of go back to what we originally were trying to grasp in the original French Revolution. Kind of secure our liberties, secure our land, secure our money and our livelihood. And so they overthrow Robespierre. They send Robespierre to the guillotine, and in 1794, he is head chopped off. So that pretty much ends that first radical republic. So, but you got to stop a little bit and ask yourself, where does Robespierre fit in history? Now, if you go outside of France, you go to England per se, you'll hear sort of this reign of terror, this time, Robespierre as being bad, horrible, really, you know, sort of almost like a symbol of tyranny. He's the precursor to Hitler's and Stalin's and Mao's and things like that. But inside, I mean, you think about Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which is all about this particular time. It doesn't paint a pretty picture. So that's outside of France. But inside France, even to this day, historians are sort of mixed. Some say, yep, he's the symbol of tyranny, forerunner of all the bad guys that ever rose to being a dictator. But there are still quite a few French historians who sort of label him as he's the man of the hour. He's the man of necessity. He's the only one who is strong enough, loud enough, influential enough to really hold on to the Republic and to the goals, the aims, the ultimate goals and aims. Maybe not his means, but he was decisive. And so they lift him up as a man of great character and fortitude and strength and leadership. And so you got to kind of, well, which one is he? You know, even Hitler, to some people in Germany, was considered a hero. Brought his people out of economic ruin, gave them employment, brought them from being, you know, having a reputation of being really bad and ugly and horrible people out of World War I, gave them a reputation of being industrial giants. So people liked that feeling. They liked getting out of the muck of where they were before Hitler rose to power. They may not now look back and say, oh, wow, great guy. But nonetheless, at the time, as he rose to power, he had a lot of support and did many things, historically speaking, at that time that would be considered by many nationalists, many people, as being good, beneficial, something to take advantage of. So where Robespierre fits, that's kind of up to you. You'll have to kind of balance it and figure out where you think he goes as far as good or bad. But we're not finished yet. Life is going to keep on going. We have this new group that's risen up to power, sort of a new republic, another republic. This is going to be, see, French Revolution, First Republic. That was knocked down with Robespierre. Now we got another republic, the bourgeois republic that's rising up. And so we're going to take a look at that in our next video.